And I'm going to put us live on Facebook. We are live on Facebook. Hey, Facebook friends and family. I'm Love Coach Scott Thomas, and I am here with the lovely Trish, my teaching partner,
Hey
and
everyone, happy Friday night.
our super special guest, who is honestly going to dominate the evening because he has so much to share. This is Mark Anthony, and you saw him on Saturday Night Alive on our Halloween show. And as I got to know him, he has so much knowledge and information about so many different things. And the subject of Friday the 13th came up. And it turns out he has a lot of really fascinating history and I think some allegory. This is Mark, the psychic lawyer, the psychic explorer, has his own radio show, internationally acclaimed. Man, you've got so many things going on. I tell you, we could probably do we could do a show with you every week and not run out of material.
Well, I appreciate that, Scott, and thank you, Trish. And I want to also say thank you to everyone tuning in to the show tonight. And it's an honor to be here. And it's funny because I did the Halloween show, which is October 31st, and now I'm here on Friday the 13th, 1331, 13. So we got some numerological mojo going on.
That's true. That's true. We got it going on, Mark. All right, well let's dive right in. Tell us about the history of Friday the 13th and how it impacted the Constitution.
Well, there's a lot to the number 13 in our culture. And what's fascinating is that in ancient Egypt and in ancient China, 13 was considered a number of great luck. But then in the Nordic culture and the Nordic and the Viking culture, 13 was seen as unlucky. And the reason for that, according to the Norse religion, the 12 main gods, they were having a banquet and they didn't invite Loki, who is the god of mischief, fire, and deception. So Loki crashes the party. And Loki beguiles the blind god to shoot an arrow tipped with mistletoe and at the god Balder, who was the god of light, and it kills him. And so in the Nordic world, the number 13 became unlucky, and especially for a dinner party, it's like forbidden. You don't have 13 people for dinner. You can have 14 people, you can have 12 people, you can have any number, but not 13. In the Christian tradition, the number 13 was seen as unlucky because, according to legend, there were 13 people at the Last Supper, 12 disciples in Christ. And who was it that left first but Judas Iscariot to go and betray Jesus? So that was part of culture and legend. But you ever notice how any hotel that's a high rise, most of them don't have a 13th floor? How many of us have been in a hotel and you'll see the 12th floor and the 14th floor? And then on the individual floors, how many times have you noticed there's not a room like 413 on the 4th floor? Okay. And there's an actual fear of Friday the 13th, which psychologists have referred to as frigatriskaidekaphobia. And there's another word for it, paratriskaidekatriphobia. One's Latin, one's Greek, and they both mean a phobia of Friday the 13th. There's a difference between a fear and a phobia, Scott and Trish. A fear is natural. Okay, it's like a fear of sticking your hand into a roaring fire. That's actually a pretty good fear.
Right.
But a phobia, it seizes you and you can break out in a sweat. You can have a panic attack. And think about people that have a phobia such as claustrophobia, being stuck in an enclosed place. I know some people that have such a claustrophobia, they won't even go into an elevator. Then there's people who have fear of heights. I think they call that agoraphobia, where they break out into a sweat and you're terrified. And many of us may scoff at frigatriskaidekaphobia, thinking that's ridiculous, but 21 million Americans, and it's been estimated by what used to be the Institute of Phobias in North Carolina. Unfortunately, the the psychologist who was the head of it passed recently, because I've been trying to get hold of him to discuss this further. But 21 million Americans have such an intense fear of Friday the 13th. They
Wow.
won't travel, they won't go to work, they won't go to school, they won't shop. And it's estimated that every Friday the 13th, the US economy loses $1 billion on that day.
Wow.
Isn't that, I mean, it's like that's startling. So, where did this come from? And this intrigued me because, as a psychic medium, I'm always interested in supernatural phenomenon. But part of my work is dispelling fear and superstition because I believe that there is a logical explanation for everything. So my study of Friday the 13th took me back in time over 1,000 years to the Crusades. And for the benefit of the listeners, I think everybody's heard the word crusade or crusader, but the Crusades were a series of religious wars. That's always good. Where European kings were waging wars in what is now Israel to recapture it from Muslims. And we could spend hours just getting into the background on the Crusades. But what had happened is, originally, Jerusalem was under the control of the Greeks. They called it the Byzantine Empire, which was the eastern half of what was the Roman Empire. And then Arab Muslims conquered it. And the Arab Muslims allowed Christian pilgrims to go to and fro to the holy sites in Jerusalem. But then Turkish Muslims conquered the region. And the Turks were not so inclined to allow Christian pilgrims in and out. And that triggered the Crusades. And in the first crusade, which captured Jerusalem in the year 1099, the Christian armies were absolutely brutal. They slaughtered over 20,000 people in Jerusalem. They didn't care if they were Jewish, Muslim, whoever. It was chronicled that the streets ran red with blood. And there was a special military order, a religious military order among the Crusaders. And they were ordained priests and they were highly trained warriors. They were essentially the Delta Force of the medieval era.
Okay.
And this particular unit was given control of the Dome of the Rock, and it was believed to be, there was a mosque on it, and it was believed to be the site of King Solomon's temple. And the only thing left of Solomon's temple is the Wailing Wall. And this was known as the Temple Mount, and they were now called the Knights of the Temple Mount, which we know them as the Knights Templar.
Right.
Okay. Now, the Knights Templar were extremely intelligent, and according to legend, the Knights Templar, while excavating the Temple Mount, it is rumored that they actually discovered the lost Ark of the Covenant, which we all know from Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Harrison Ford rescues it from the Nazis. Okay. But it was also rumored that the Knights Templar may very well have located and possessed the Holy Grail, the cup Jesus used at the Last Supper. Now, neither of those have been substantiated, as far as I know, by any credible evidence, but it's certainly added to the mystique of the Knights Templar. But that's just the beginning. They were a very secretive organization, also very intelligent, and they realized that to wage wars, that costs money. So they set up a banking system essentially from Britain all the way to Jerusalem, spanning all of Europe and the Mediterranean world. And so if you were going to go off on a crusade, you would take your gold and deposit it at a Templar depository. They would give you a certificate, and you could trade that certificate at any Templar's repository between basically London and Jerusalem and receive your money back, but you had to pay interest. Okay, which in the medieval era was the sin of usury. Well, over about 2 centuries of the Crusades, which were ultimately a failure, while the Crusades were a failure, the Knights Templar prospered. They had their own ships, they had their own buildings, their own castles, and they had these secretive organizations. And European kings continued to borrow money from them and have to pay back the interest. Well, they were no longer financing the Crusades, they were financing wars against other European kings. And this brings us to the year 1307.
Cool.
King Philippe the Fourth of France, known as Philippe the Fair, because he had this, creamy complexion, and he was young and handsome, and he was a ruthless tyrant to the fingertips. And he was up to his eyeballs in debt to the Knights Templar. And so was his puppet and political ally, Pope Clement V. Now, this is a very interesting period in European history, because when we think of the popes, we think, okay, they're in Rome. But there was a period where the King of France basically made the Pope an offer he couldn't refuse, and they relocated the Vatican to southern France, to the city of Avignon. I've spent quite a bit of time in Avignon, and it's really beautiful, especially the Palais du Pape, the Palace of the Popes. And you got to go there if you're ever there. And it's really neat because it looks like right out of a storybook, with the turrets and the flags flying, and the whole city's walled in. And but for the better part of a century, the popes were based in France, and the King of France was the most powerful ruler in Europe. Well, Clement and King Philippe, they were so heavily in debt, and the head of the Knights Templar, what they call their Grand Master, his name was Jacques de Molay. And man, they could do a whole mini series on TV on Jacques de Molay. And he may have been a priest and forgiving, but the one thing he wasn't about to forgive was the money that Philippe and Clement owed him. So the king and the Pope conspired to get rid of their debt. And how do you think they did that?
Fear.
Well, get rid of the debt and get rid of the Knights Templar. Okay. So, but fear is a big part of it. So you are definitely on the right track, Trish. What they did is, since the Pope was the ecclesiastical authority and the king had the army, they came up with a list of trumped up charges of usury, sodomy, blasphemy, heresy, witchcraft, and against the Knights Templar. So in a coordinated raid at dawn on Friday, October 13th of the year 1307, the French army arrested Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, and 60 of his knights. And they'd sent messages out through all of France and other European kingdoms to round up all the Knights Templar. Well, of course, Jacques de Molay and the Knights Templar said, no, we are men of God, and we are not guilty of these. Well, this is also medieval France. Right. So they were immediately, they were subjected to thumb screws, the Iron Maiden, the rack, hot pokers. These men were tortured horribly, horrifying, the worst of the, whenever you think of medieval torture chamber, well, these guys were in it. And not surprisingly, they confessed.
Of course.
Exactly. And see, the Knights Templar was a secretive organization. And because of the secret organization, it was trumped up that they were spitting on the cross, committing homosexual practices, defiling God, and all these really, really dreadful and false accusations. And Jacques de Molay was convicted of witchcraft and ordered to be burned at the stake. So 7 years after his arrest, he asked that his funeral pyre, his last wish, be erected where he could see the Cathedral of Notre Dame. So on March 18th of 1314, Jacques de Molay was burned at the stake. And as the fires were engulfing his body, he cried out for justice and that he would see the King of France and the Pope before God with him. Well, within a month, Pope Clement drops dead, presumably of a stroke. And a few months later, Philippe is killed in a hunting accident. So now it spreads throughout Europe that Jacques de Molay was indeed an agent of Satan and invoked the dark powers to strike down the all-powerful King of France and Christ's representative on earth, the Pope. But then other people were thinking, well, maybe the Knights Templar were innocent, and perhaps Jacques de Molay was invoking the justice of God to strike down the evil plan. But one thing all led back to Friday the 13th in October of 1307. And so all throughout Europe, people may have gotten a little bit confused or even forgotten the facts, but it came down to Friday the 13th was an accursed day, and it was either a day of judgment from God or a day of satanic power. Well, we know that there's a link here, which brings us to today, because a few decades after this, Geoffrey Chaucer writes in the Canterbury Tales, and all of us who had to take British literature in high school all had to suffer through, all had to read the Canterbury Tales. And there's a line in there about how Friday the 13th is an accursed day. So it was an established tradition within 40 years.
Wow.
Wow.
But there's more.
Oh,
No doubt.
Not all of the Knights Templar fell prey to this scheme. Now, these are clever guys. Remember, these are highly trained warriors. They had lots of cash, even though the King of France seized their treasury. Okay, so he was balancing his budget, although he didn't have time to enjoy it very much. But the Templar Knights also owned a whole fleet of ships, and a lot of them escaped to Scotland. Just north of England, of course. And because of their intelligence and their architectural skills, they founded a guild, and they started constructing great buildings, because the Templars have been doing that. They've been building castles and cathedrals all throughout Europe. And so they melded into Scottish society, although they maintained their secretive nature and organization. And they became Masons. And there were two types of Masons in Scotland. There was the rough Masons, and what they did is, those are the guys that got the big blocks and boulders and shaped them. And then there was the Masons who worked on freestone, because it was softer and they could do the intricate carving. And they became known as the Freemasons. Okay. All right. So they maintained a tradition of looking back and understanding their own history. So now we're up to the 1500s, and then there's the discovery of the New World. So eventually, the Freemasons come to America. In fact, of the 59 men who signed the U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence, 9 of them were Freemasons. But then, after we won the War of Independence against Britain, the United States Constitution was enacted, and 39 of the men who signed the U.S. Constitution into existence, 13 of them were Freemasons. Okay, so there's the number 13 again. And then in 1781, the 8th Amendment to the United States Constitution was enacted, and that amendment was the ban on cruel and unusual punishment. And there's the link. In the Templar tradition, in the Freemason tradition, they remembered full well of the injustices, the fraudulent charges, the cruelty, the torture that was inflicted upon their forebears. And in 1791, the United States was the only country in the world to officially ban torture, aka cruel and unusual punishment. So when we look at it in the bigger scheme of things, what happened to those Knights Templar 700 years ago was not in vain, because that cruelty led to the foundation of a new form of government, of a democracy, and one which banned torture. Think about it. Anywhere else in the world at that time, if you were arrested and accused of a crime, what happened to the Knights Templar in France very well was going to happen to you. And these type of things were already going on in North America. Look at the Salem witch trials in the 1690s. Giles Corey, he was accused of witchcraft in Salem, and he refused to confess, and they laid him on the ground, and they put like a door on top of him, plank, and they started putting rocks on top of it, and to crush him to death. And he was the only one of the witches or people accused of being a witch who was tortured, who didn't give in. In fact, he said, "I curse all of," those are his last words, is he cursed all of his accusers. And what's funny is where Giles Corey was executed is in what is now the cemetery in Salem. And according to legend, and I was there on a paranormal investigation, supposedly the spirit of Giles Corey still walks the cemetery in Salem. But anyway, that's a bit of the insight into how something which happened so long ago is in a sense still having an impact upon us, but in a positive way.
Wow. That was a lot.
It is. Yeah. It's funny. It's like, I told it in like 15, 20 minutes. How long it took to research that, but it was so fascinating. The deeper I went, there was more and more. And, for those of us who study history, is the present is the sum total of the decisions made in the past. Well, that's a lot of decisions.
Yeah, for a long time. Oh man, I'm just, so it's a really interesting thought of how, we'll call it collective decisions or collective consciousness, kind of, we just participate. Like we're like, oh yeah, this is what happens. And we're just gonna it's either based in fear or excitement or any number of things that we choose. And so it's, you can start to see how this one decision or this decision of these that started the witch hunts is now still here. I mean, literally, when you go to hotels and things, they don't have a 13th floor, which I always thought was really interesting. And I always tripped out because I was like, wait, isn't that the 13th floor, even though we're still
yeah. Yeah. I mean, geographically, numerically, positionally, it is 13, but we just stuck a different number on it. But people, you look though, 700 years ago, devils, demons walking there. Well, there's a lot of people in this country even that are all, they're finding devils in their sugar bowl, devils in their, there's the devil and demon crowd, and, they're usually, religious extremists. I mean, there's a difference between being a person of faith and being a religious fanatic.
Sure.
When you have a mouthful of scripture and a heart full of hate, that does not a person of faith make. Okay. That's a religious fanatic. And there's people, and Trish, you nailed it on the head when you said fear. Now think about all that, fear.
Easiest way to control masses. Just saying.
It is. Religion uses fear. If you look at the Old Testament, everything's fear. You look at the Quran, with all due respect to our Muslim brothers, on page 1, it says these words are for those who fear Allah. And, when you start right out of the box with fear, and then this, radical philosopher avatar Jesus comes around and starts telling everyone, fear not, we're all brothers and sisters. It's like, that's kind of a radical thought. But with fear, the founding fathers of this country, who were extremely flawed people, we tend to, George Washington, I cannot tell a lie. I mean, really, do you believe that? He was a politician and he was a general. And Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, yet he owned 200 human beings, as did George Washington. They were slave owners. And we think that politics is nasty now. Okay, so George Washington, his vice president was John Adams, whom he hated. Okay, didn't get along, never let him in any of the meetings. Washington, though, was a very noble man, And he decided only to have 2 terms. He could have continued being
Yes.
president for as long as he wanted. So John Adams becomes president. John Adams is from Massachusetts, doesn't believe in slavery. His vice president's Thomas Jefferson. They hate each other. And Thomas Jefferson runs against him and says to the newspaper who prints it that John Adams is a hermaphrodite. Okay. I mean, we think politics is nasty now. I mean, and so then Adams loses after his first term. And then Thomas Jefferson, we think he's this great guy, and he's sleeping with his slaves, and he doesn't free any of them. So it's really fascinating when we look at the founding fathers. But despite their flaws, they and the reason I'm saying all this, Tiffany, Trish, I don't know why I said Tiffany, Trish, is that they didn't want people to be afraid of the government.
Oh, really?
Think about it. In Great Britain at that time, in France or Spain or Portugal or anywhere in Europe, people were terrified of the government. But the concept of innocent until proven guilty was a radical idea. A ban on cruel and unusual punishment, a warrant requirement. And I was both a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney. Let me tell you, warrant requirements are a real big deal. I mean, there's countries in the world where if you're suspected of something, they just kick the door in and go and round everybody up. So despite their flaws, they had these radical ideas that we should not fear the government, though the innocent should have nothing to fear, and people should not be living in fear. But like you said correctly, Trish, fear is a way of controlling people.
Yeah.
I want to share a thought, and then I have a couple of questions for you, one from our audience. But one thing that some people may not know that's really, really extraordinary is that, as you said, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were bitter, bitter rivals.
Yes.
One was a slave owner from Virginia, the other Massachusetts. Bitter rivals, but there's something about their polarity that helped to create our country. And polarity in relationship can create an amazing thing.
Yeah.
What I'm about to share is a historical fact. You can Google it. Bitter rivals, they both died on the exact same day and hours of each other. And not just any day. They died on July 4th, 1826. Exactly 50 years after the Declaration of Independence and after, this all started. And Jefferson died first. Of course, nobody knew until later because there was no phone, but Jefferson died first. And a few hours later, Adams, just before he died, his last words were, "Jefferson lives."
Yes.
And he died.
Yes.
Weren't they friends though? Like
Toward the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
At the end, they came back
and
together.
then they got all like,
They were
friends, then bitter political enemies, and then after they got old, they wrote each other letters and they became friends again.
Well, and especially back then, when you were president, you didn't get a pension, you didn't get a library, you didn't get anything.
Yeah.
Okay. And John Adams was struggling to keep his head above water. And Jefferson may have been a brilliant architect and something of a Renaissance man, but he was a terrible businessman. And Monticello, his plantation was constantly running in the red. But what they discovered is they were in the ex-president's club. And that's a lonely club. And it's funny here because for the most part, ex-presidents of the United States get along. I remember seeing an interview with Gerald Ford, how he said he and Jimmy Carter became best friends. They'd been terribly bitter rivals, but they became, because who else can relate to you?
Absolutely. Bill Clinton and George Bush Sr., they became very good friends, and they started a nonprofit organization together and traveled together, promoting it.
I remember in one of the last interviews conducted of George Harrison, he said, the only people who don't treat me like a Beatle are Paul and Ringo.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
they're just so close.
Derek in our Zoom room asks, do any historical religious texts contain references to the number 13? Is there any significance? And if you do read my question, please tell Mark, Derek from Canada says hello. I had a reading with him last month.
Oh, well, thank you. Actually, the religious text that has the number 13 in it, it's actually more of a legal text, comes from ancient, I believe it's Hammurabi's Code from Sumeria. And what it is, there was apparently a typo and they left out the number 13, and it has been interpreted as that must be some type of curse or some type of dire warning about the number 13, but then archaeologists re-examining it said that the person who initially translated it mistranslated it because 13 was in there. So I'm not aware of any particular religious text. It's more of, well, certainly in the Nordic religion, 13, where the god Loki has Balder struck down, but that's not a religious text that too many people are taking very seriously these days. And the interesting thing about Balder, if you'll let me digress for a moment, Balder was the god of light, and everybody loved him, and he was all about peace and love and be groovy. And he was invulnerable to everything. So at Norse god dinner parties, and the Norse gods, we're talking Vikings, so their idea of a party was eat till it hurt, drink till you're wasted, and then fight. And so in the Nordic religion, they would throw weapons at Balder and they'd all bounce off of him. But there was one thing that he was not immune to, and that was mistletoe. And so the evil god Loki was who appeared invisible to, and he started whispering, and Loki's where we get Lucifer, because Loki's daughter was the goddess of death and her name was Hel, and her name literally was Hel, and she presided over the afterlife. But anyway, Loki basically manipulated the blind god Hoder to shoot an arrow at Balder tipped with mistletoe, and it killed him. And the gods were devastated. And so the mother goddess, the mother of Balder, Freya or Frigga, which is where Friday comes from, Frigga, Friday, triskaidekaphobia, see, they're all tying together here. She went to the goddess Hel and asked her to restore the soul of Balder. And on the third day, Balder rose from the dead. Now, isn't that interesting? The god of light, struck down by the forces of evil, resurrects on the third day. Now, this was a religion of the Nordic people on the northern border of the Roman Empire, which was in the process of becoming Christian, and this predated Christianity by a good 1,000 years. I'm sure that had no effect on any other religions swirling around in the Roman Empire in the 1st century AD, but I digress. But the thing is, we see a reoccurring pattern in religions, not just the Nordic, but also the Greco-Roman religions, also the religions of the Middle East, particularly like the Egyptians. The god Osiris is struck down by the evil god Set and rises from the dead. The god Bel-Marduk in the Babylonian tradition, certainly the Greeks with Adonis. And this seems to be a reoccurring pattern. And I'm not casting aspersions on any religion, but I think it is an innate need for humans to understand that eventually the light and that the light overcomes darkness, and that death is not a permanent state, and that and this is certainly what I try to help people understand in my capacity as a medium, is that life is eternal. And so people created these religious constructs and these stories to help people cope with the seeming finality of death. And so they use a figure like Balder, a pure god of light and peace, who's struck down by death, yet is able to emerge from it. And these are important things for people. And certainly that is the basic tenet of Christianity, which bears very interesting similarities to all the religions of the region, in addition to the Viking Nordic religion.
Oh, yeah,
Thought
and
about-
oh, go ahead, Trish.
No, you go ahead.
I was just saying, well, the Christians, especially in Britain, basically all of our current holidays, they took pagan holidays
Yeah.
and usurped them. It was like, they took, I mean, that's why Christmas is celebrated in December, even though Jesus was born in March or April.
Right.
But they took all the pagan holidays and switched them around and got it away from the pagan and into promoting Christianity.
Well, they did. And it also made the transition from the ancient religion to the new religion easier. Also, we now know, and that's one of the lectures that I give, and I'm not going to get into that tonight because we may do that, maybe closer to Christmas, but that we now know that Jesus was most likely born in April. But in the early Christian era, nobody had any idea because it's not mentioned anywhere in Scripture when he was born. And so the Roman festival of Saturnalia was right around December 21st, as was the celebration of solstice. And Saturnalia was kind of the last blast before winter set in. And so the Romans did what they always did and have a drunken orgy and overeat and all that. But people were terrified of winter because that's when you starve to death. Food supplies ran low, famine, it was cold, you'd freeze to death. And so I believe it was Pope Gregory the Great in the year 600 decreed that December 25th, which was the Roman festival, it was the year 300. It was the year 300, Pope Gregory the Great decreed that December 25th, which had traditionally been the Roman festival of Sol Invictus, would now be the birth of Christ because it symbolized the light coming to the darkest time of the year to help prevent, once again, Trish, people's fear. And so a lot of like you correctly said, Scott, a lot of the Christian holidays were basically replacing pagan holidays. And so what? I know that I remember a friend of mine who was a Jehovah's Witness, couldn't do birthdays, couldn't do holidays, couldn't do this. It's like, with all due respect to them, how boring. Come on, we got to have a party now and again. We got to celebrate things. So what if our kids go trick-or-treating and dress up as Halloween? And not that I often quote Sean Hannity, but he did say something funny about Halloween. He said, Halloween's nothing more than a socialist holiday that teaches kids to bang on other people's doors and demand something for nothing. And then he said... And he said, just kidding, I'm actually taking my kids trick-or-treating tonight. And it was funny to see. And like I said, it's probably the only time I'll ever be quoting him. But the thing is, it's important for people to have holidays. Yeah. And, we're coming up on Thanksgiving, and this is a tough holiday season.
Yeah, it is.
And I really recommend people, if you have to cancel your big family get together this year and Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever, do it. We got to get through this. Call your family, FaceTime them, Zoom them, but don't expose people to COVID-19. It's not a hoax. It's not phony. The people that say it is, you see stories about them. Minister who denied COVID dies of it. People die of it. This is a very, very real thing, and it's extremely dangerous. I'm sorry.
I really love my grandma. Please don't get her sick.
Well, yeah. I saw
my mom.
I saw a posting on the news that said my grandfather was died because of a dinner party.
Yeah.
How would you feel? How would you feel? And look, I don't like it either. I don't like wearing a mask, but I do. Okay.
I don't like getting COVID tests to make sure that I'm safe to go hang out with my friends.
Yeah, who likes doing all the social distancing and avoiding this? But sometimes you have to a little precaution goes a real long way, because once again, it's a fear thing. And these people that, oh, they're infringing on my rights. Well, if you hate wearing a mask, I'm sure you're going to love being on a ventilator. I mean, it's come on.
Your sarcasm slaves me.
But it's true. I mean, it's true. I mean, all these people, oh, let my immune system deal with it. Well, newsflash, we don't have an immunity to this. It's a brand new disease. And I'm sure it wasn't engineered in China at all. And maybe it was, and maybe it wasn't. But the fact is, human history, and I'm a student of history, human history is filled with pandemics and plagues. And if you look at the bubonic plague in the medieval era, it wiped out like 1/4 of the people in the world at the time.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you had the sweating sickness in the 16th century. And scientists still don't know what the sweating sickness was. It came, it killed a whole lot of people. Apparently, people started sweating profusely. So I'm assuming they were developing high fevers. And then it just mysteriously disappeared. Then you had the plague of, I think it was 1665. And Sir Isaac Newton, one of my faves, he invented physics and calculus and the laws of optics and the laws of gravity and motion. And it wasn't the nicest guy in the world, from what I understand, but he self-quarantined. And while he was in self-quarantine, he invented calculus. So he cursed every high school student from 1665 onwards with calculus. And then we had the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, 1919. And for the people who say that this is a hoax, the Spanish flu was beginning to decline until the end of World War I. And everyone threw a big party in the street, and then it exploded and came back with a vengeance in 1619. Now, going back to our friends, the Knights Templar, back in the medieval era, people thought that it was evil spirits that were making people sick. Also, they thought that it was noxious vapors at night. You ever see the movie Gone with the Wind?
Sure.
Okay,
No.
remember when Scarlet or whoever is going, oh, I got the vapors, I got the vapor. People actually believed in that era that at nighttime, noxious gases would arrive that inflicted illness, AKA the vapors.
Wow.
And we think of it as funny as these Southern women were going around fanning, themselves off talking about the vapors. And it wasn't until science came along with the discovery of the microscope that started showing that diseases were caused by germs, viruses, fungus, and it put all this evil spirit and demon possession to the side. So that's why I'm fast forwarding to the year 2020. It is science where we must now place our faith in defeating this pandemic, and saying it's a hoax and it's affecting my liberty and the blood of Jesus will save me and all this. I mean, I've actually heard people say the blood of Jesus will protect me. Well, it did a great job in 1918. And I know, and in 1665 and in the bubonic plague. And perhaps, and I'm not disparaging Jesus. I think instead Jesus, as a manifestation of God, perhaps the defense that God gave us is what's between our ears. In other words, our brain. So stop, relying on, I'll send happy thoughts and the disease will go away. And instead, let's use our brains. Let's listen to our scientists. Let's approach this biological problem with biological solutions. So I'll get off my soapbox and I'm open for questions.
Thank you.
Where when you were talking about the sweating sickness, Joel says, "Oh, the sweating sickness sounds like menopause." And then
It could have been.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
My mother was always very ladylike, and so she would, keep her menopausal things to herself. And I remember I had just gotten out of law school. I was 24 years old, and I was working at this place, and I had a secretary that was in her late 40s, and I walked into her office one time, and I was like, because she had her blouse open and a big chunk of ice right between her breasts. She goes, "I'm having a hot flash," and I just turned around and walked out, and all of a sudden I was like, "Oh my God."
A couple of questions are coming. I'm going to kind of bring us back to.
Sure. Sorry.
That's all right. Jan Kaplan, who's a dear friend of ours, asks or says, amazing likenesses through the ages, light overcoming darkness, three-day resurrections, pagan stories still influencing. And she wanted to ask about Diwali, since it is right now Diwali time, if you have any thoughts about that.
Well,
And
I've
then
always
also,
thought, sorry.
go ahead.
Oh,
Trish.
I've always thought that religion sounds a lot like most religions sound. It sounds like it's a game of telephone. You know, when you're as a child, it's like you speak into the cup and then it reverberates and someone can hear it, and then it just kind of like reverberates out because there's so many similarities that it just sounds like the same similar story but told from a different point of view.
Yeah.
Like
And
shooting star and 10 people are watching it and you're like, oh my God, did you see? And you could make up demon or angel or quote unquote star or whatever it could be.
Well,
God.
Interesting. I was shooting a movie in Maui back in 1989, and about a dozen of us spent an evening watching a UFO relating to us.
Oh.
And it was definitely an unidentified flying object. It was doing things that no airplane or helicopter could do. It was close enough. It was, disc shaped, and it seemed to be relating to us. I was back in Maui, and the majority of us had like a reunion dinner for the film, but then the subject came up of our memories about the UFO night. Now, everybody remembered that we saw a UFO, but it was fascinating how over 20 years, people's memories of what it looked like, what we experienced, completely changed, right? And people had radically different memories of the same archetypal event. For all of us, it was a big event. For some people, it was absolutely ET. For some people, it was, military. For some people, it only lasted a couple of minutes. Other people, oh my God, it lasted for hours. And it was fascinating to see how our memories had changed about that archetypal event.
Well, that's why eyewitness statements don't work. Like, because you will remember in the state of emotion that you were in then.
At the time.
And each time you remember it in a different emotional state, it manipulates the memory.
Yeah.
So that's why they try to get eyewitnesses like really quickly, but
right. You got to get it while it's in the court system. That's a real big deal, is to get the witness statement as soon as possible.
Yeah, each time you tell it.
I used to work at this law firm, and there's this the senior partner. He was a great trial lawyer, and I remember he had this police officer on the witness stand, and he's and all of a sudden he said he's going through the police report, and he said, well, there's very few facts here. He said, but today you seem to remember a whole lot of things that you didn't seem to know a year and a half ago when you made this arrest. He said, officer, are you one of those people whose memory gets better with time? And it was the way he said it. And it just made so much sense. Okay. And I think what you're alluding to, Trish, is with these, religions where people witness an event and then they begin to talk about it. And there's a permutation as to what they think they saw. But you also brought up a very, very relevant point, both of you did, is about similarities. And the question had that as well about, the three and the light over dark. What I think that this is, God exists. I firmly believe this. The work that I do, I have five points that I try, and I hope if my life has any meaning, it's to help people understand this, that God exists, that the afterlife exists, that our soul is an immortal living spirit, that we can communicate with souls, and that we will be reunited with our loved ones when it is our time to leave the material world. Those are the 5 points that have been transmitted to me that I'm supposed to help people with. And I believe that there are universal truths that life transcends physical death, that the power of the light, which is our ability to perceive the divine power that we call God, whether it's in a near-death experience encountering the light, or in meditation, or in spirit communication, that's how we perceive what you and I would call the divine. And so that the different cultures put their cultural spin, bias, and interpretation. So what we're dealing with when we are communicating with the higher power is infinity. And the human brain is not designed on purpose to be able to grasp infinity. So we put a human face on it, because, right. And that's why, it's funny because, just look at depictions of Christ. If you look at artists, French artists, Jesus has a decidedly French look about him. In Germany, Jesus tends to have blonde hair and blue eyes. In Greece, he looks very Greek, because, we want to be able to relate to the infinite in a very relatable way. And I don't think that there really is anything wrong with that. It's when people start turning into my way is the only way. Okay, that's and I know on Straight Talk we can say things like that.
And on Straight Talk we say when people believe my way is the only one way, what comes to my mind is that great line from Star Wars: "Run, Luke, run!" Right, get out of Dodge.
So there's a question coming in, and from Julia, she says, "So you all are saying there is no physical validity. It seems like you're all saying the opposite of what Mark is saying. Are you each saying your belief is more accurate than any others?" That's not what I'm saying.
No, not at all. That's not what any of us are saying. What we're saying is that the divine God exists. And I believe that, okay, God is not a neurotic white guy sitting on a throne with a scepter smiting people. Okay. Our depictions of the Almighty, and it's fascinating because both Judaism and Islam consider it to be profane, an abomination, heresy, blasphemy, to make an actual depiction of God, because the divine is beyond our understanding. Whereas in Christian tradition, certainly in Hindu and to an extent Buddhism, although in Buddhism, Buddha is not God. Buddha is a supernatural teacher with, divine connection, but is not God in the sense of a Hindu, Christian, or Muslim God. And I really don't think that there's anything wrong with that, as long as people realize that these depictions are just an ability or an attempt for us to relate to something which is beyond our ability to comprehend. Yeah. Yet on the other hand, God talks to all of us. The question is, are we listening?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wouldn't you say that God is everything? That God is this one extraordinary, impossible for our little human brains to comprehend, massive everything, that God is life, God is the universe, God is all of existence, experiencing itself in every imaginable way.
Exactly. That's what I believe, because I believe, as Nikola Tesla said, that one man calls God, another calls the laws of physics. And we know that on the subatomic level, everything at its most basic unit is electromagnetic energy, quanta, ergo the term quantum physics. And that's how God always was, always will be, is aware of what's happening everywhere, because everything is interconnected energetically. And as Albert Einstein explained, that there is no matter, there's just energy which vibrates at different frequencies, so to be perceptible to the senses. So that when somebody physically dies, the energy that is enshrined in their brain, their soul, transfers to a higher frequency. So they don't disappear, they merely transfer to another form. And so this concept, I mean, we could do an entire show on the development of the concept of God and in human form and all that. But basically, the in the Bronze and Iron Ages, when most of the religions were developed, God's depicted as a man and as a king, because that was an authoritative, all-powerful figure people could relate to. But that's really a primitive construct, because God is so much more than that, and yet also so very personal and unique to all of us. And I truly believe that we all are cells in the body of God, and that what we call God is the source of all light, power, energy, love, creation, and that there's a vast intelligence that flows through all of this. And that is very difficult to grasp, and yet also very simple, because we're all interconnected. And once again, the question is, are we listening? And we know that God is love, and that the ego edging God out is when we block God. Like people talk, the devil. I mean, I've got fundamentalist friends where, they think the devil's hiding in their vacuum cleaner or something. I don't know. It's like the devil's everywhere. There is no central command of evil. There is no hell in the archetypal sense where there's this James Bond villain going with his demons and all that. The devil's the human ego. And think about it. Whenever you've done something horrible, something cruel, something unkind, you're acting in a totally self-centered manner. Okay. Now, loving yourself and respecting and taking care of yourself is not ego. Loving yourself is a beautiful thing, but ego and self-centeredness, think about whenever you've done something unkind, you're not acting out of love for that person. You're acting out of me, ergo ego edging God out. And that's the devil. The humans don't need a guy with a pitchfork sticking you in the butt to motivate you to do horrible things. Our history would indicate quite other. The Romans understood fear really well. Okay, that they kept their empire together for the better part of 1,000 years, terrifying people. Look at what Nazi Germany did, what Pol Pot did, what Vladimir Putin's doing, what Kim Jong-un does. I mean, these are all ego-driven personalities that inflict horrible things upon people, and it's not coming from a supernatural source. It's coming from the brain, not from the spirit. And so if you look at like when Jesus went into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, and then look at Buddha, who went into the wilderness and sat underneath the Bodhisattva tree for roughly 40 days and 40 nights. And Buddha was tempted by Mara, the god of illusion, and Jesus is tempted by Satan. What's fascinating about both of these men is that they were from royal lineage. Jesus descended from David through his mother Mary. Buddha was a prince who gave it all up. Were they really being tempted by evil spirits, or was this where they were putting aside the ego and embracing their spirituality? Because think about it. Jesus was a descendant of the line of David, okay? And with his abilities, I'm sure he was a great speaker, and his presence and all that, he could have cashed in on that and pursued a life of materialism and earthly pleasure. Buddha, same thing. Yet they saw that the materialism, the ego, the me as center of the universe was not why they were here. They were here to teach people that it's about peace, love, understanding, and selflessness. And so that is why they both became enlightened after that period. And so to me, if you look at the way both Jesus and Buddha taught, it's largely through metaphor and allegory. The prodigal son, the good Samaritan, was it the 7 foolish bridesmaids, the 7 wise bridesmaids? Jesus taught through metaphor. Well, perhaps these are metaphors as well to teach us how to let go of the ego, which is, it's easier to turn the ego into a guy with horns and, and all of that. Because once again, like an image of God as a man on a throne, it's easier to understand and relate to that than it is to look at it in the greater esoteric and spiritual sense.
And to also have to look at ourselves. It's easier to externalize an evil devil
Yeah.
than it is to recognize it's the ego, because we all have an ego. So, okay, how is my ego controlling me? Or, and that's where, hard work. Okay, what are my compulsions? What are the things that I do that have hurtful consequences on myself and others? There's a fascinating thing that all throughout history, there have been different archetypal figures that people would then experience as a way of explaining pregnancies. My friend Margot Chandley did a fascinating dissertation. When the book Dracula first came out, the original Bram Stoker novel,
Yes.
all these girls were getting impregnated by Dracula.
Yeah.
In Mexico with the Chupacabra, everybody's getting impregnated by the Chupacabra. When Whitley Strieber wrote Communion, all of a sudden everybody was getting impregnated by aliens that had the almond-shaped eyes. And so there are cultural myths that take hold that then become an externalization that people truly believe are representing what's really going on in the psyche and the experience of ourselves that we're not ready to look at.
Exactly, Scott. As usual, you nailed it right on the head. Because the devil, remember, there used to be a comedian, Flip Wilson, the devil made me do it. Because it's easy to blame your bad behavior. Well, the devil made me. No, you made you do it.
That's right.
You made you do it. The devil's another form of avoiding responsibility for your own actions. It's like, yeah. Well, in my capacity as an attorney, as in a medium, a lot of times the media brings me on when the legal system and the paranormal collide. And think about, there are cases where people claim I was possessed by a demon, and that's why I committed this murder. Well, it's just another version of the insanity defense, the McNaughton rule, which the question is, was the person aware of what they did? And if they weren't aware, then technically they're not responsible. That doesn't necessarily mean you go off scot-free. No puns.
No pun intended.
Free. It's like when people hit the mark, ouch, but I've yet to see a demonic possession as a defense to murder case actually stick. Yeah. The concept of the devil is just a way of saying, well, I'm avoiding a responsibility of this. And I think that, when you certainly look at the teachings of Jesus, personal responsibility is front and center. When he said, go and sin no more, it's entirely up to us. So
on this subject, because a few people have asked in our chat box,
sure.
Do you believe in evil? And do you believe that evil can personify itself in some human or physical form?
I certainly believe in evil because I'm a student of history, and all you have to do is look at our history. So evil is a very real thing. Do I believe in evil spirits and demons and devils? No, I do not. And this is where I depart with a lot of my colleagues that are mediums, and I've been on paranormal investigations, and it's funny because if you're going to do a paranormal investigation, you need to approach it using the scientific method, where you're there to compile evidence and review the data and then make a logical decision. And so I was at a paranormal investigation, and they had the EVP set up, and it was like, and I was listening to it, and my manager Rocky was with me, and the ghost hunter was there, and there was all these other people, and he goes, "It's a demon," and I heard Stephen, and Rocky goes, "I heard Stephen too." No, it's a demon. It's like, well, no, we heard Stephen, and because what it was, their mind was filling in the blanks that it had to be Steve, demon, but we heard Stephen.
That's funny. That is funny.
Oh, wait, have you seen the little girl, the video of the little girl going around where she's like talking to her mom and her mom's like cracking up and she's like, yeah, I know what God's name is. Have you seen this one, Mark?
No, go ahead.
it's this adorable little girl, and her mom's cracking up, and she's like, "Well, what's God's name?" And she's like, "Howard."
Oh, but I have-
How do you know that? And she's like, he's like Howard. She's like, no,
Oh, but-
how do you know his name's Howard? And she goes, "Our Father who art in heaven, Howard be thy name."
Howard, oh my God, that's hilarious. Well, it's funny on an unrelated topic. There's a show that I used to watch. It was called Fresh Off the Boat. I don't even know if it's still on. It's about an Asian American family, and one of the little boys was having a hard time with Santa, and his mother said, "Well, everyone knows that Santa is Chinese." He goes, "He is? Yes. Why do you think all the toys say made in China on the bottom of them?" So
We're getting silly, kids. We're getting silly.
we got to laugh at ourselves now.
Oh yeah,
and
no,
again.
absolutely. Right. I love it. I love it. That's one of my favorite things about Trish is Trish brings out the silly, which is a very good thing. And by the way,
Oh yeah, I'm the wrench in the
Noel brings up James Van Prague, who's actually somebody that I've worked with quite a bit. So one last question that just keeps coming up about the evil thing. What about people who believe they've made a deal with the devil? Because I've actually worked and known people who really believed that with all their hearts, and in one case it cost him his life. What's your take on that?
There's one soul per customer. You can't sell it. Okay. Our soul's an immortal living spirit, and once free of the confines of a material world existence, reverts to a higher frequency. It doesn't go to a hell. It doesn't always go to the highest frequency, because the other side is like in a FM radio or AM radio dial. There's many different frequencies and stations there.
In my father's house, there are many mansions.
Exactly. And I think that people who believe that, with all due respect to them, I think it's a form of mental illness, a psychosis. I think that they are, because I've encountered people like that certainly in my work as an attorney during Baker Act proceedings, which is where people are being involuntarily committed because they're a danger to themselves or others. And once again, the boogeyman, the devil, whatever, is a way for people in their guilt and their shame and their psyche to find an explanation why they did what they did. In the final analysis, it comes down to your own personal decisions, although there are people who do suffer from mental disorders who are not capable of formulating those decisions. And so that's why the law must be flexible and take these in a case-by-case basis. Once again, getting back to our founding fathers who came up with, we should not be afraid of the government, although many of us are, at least that's the theory. And certainly America is a work in progress. We are far from perfect. And I like what Winston Churchill said about democracy. He said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others.
Trish, I think, has something.
Yeah, so one of our viewers, Diane, asks, do you think it's God or guardian angels that speak to us when in a near-death experience, or we hear a voice and time is suspended? Is there a hierarchy?
I think it's all of the above. There's a lot of non-human spiritual intelligence in the higher frequencies. And I've encountered on many occasions, first, I believe in my near-death experience when I was 4, angelic entities. And angelic entities and human entities seem to kind of hang around in the same frequencies or close to it. Then, of course, there's the spirits of animals. There's the elementals, which are non-human spiritual intelligence that appear to be more closely aligned, let's say, with animals and plants and earth energies. And I think a lot of people that encounter elementals, they don't understand what it is and they're afraid of it. And ergo, it's a demon, although it may be a elemental named Stephen. Well, and with elementals, like if you look at the Japanese religion, Shintoism, They believe in the kami, Kami, and their spirits, their deities, and they're in particular locations and around. And when I was in Japan, I encountered places that are supposed to be sacred to the kami, and I would get this feeling. And I noticed that same sensation when I was in England, in an area that they said, oh, there's a ferry there. And then I was somewhere else, and they said that it was what is in Hawaii, the Metahune. Okay, yeah. We're talking about the same energies. It's just that, you know, sometimes they're called elves or leprechauns or sprites or fairies or kami or whatever. So there's a whole plethora of non-human spiritual intelligence, which is very easy for people to label as evil spirits and demons. And they're not necessarily negative. It's just that they're not particularly concerned with interacting with humans. And sometimes our paths cross. And people get the cold chills and tingles. So when you get the cold chills and tingles, that's the same physiological response in flight or fight. So you immediately jump to the conclusion that it's negative. Whereas if you approach it objectively, that's your body's electrical system reacting to the interfacing of the electromagnetic energy of a spirit, and you get that sensation. And so that's why, like when I connect with spirits and I get this, it's funny when I see films of myself and I, do this, because I can tell when their electrical field's hitting mine and I get this physiological response. And the more you work with it, you get used to it. So I hope that answers the question.
Beautiful. Well, the next question is, how do people get more Mark Anthony? I'm pulling up, this is amazing, all the books that you've written. Of course, Evidence of Eternity is probably...
Well, those my two books are there. Evidence of Eternity is on one end, Never Letting Go. Those are all the languages that they've been translated in so far. But both my books are still on the spiritual bestseller list. And I just completed my third book, which is in the pipeline right now. I'm going to be turning everything over to my literary agent so she can start shopping it in January. It's funny, people think if you write a book that it's somehow on a shelf a week later. It's like, oh no. It is a process. And it's one that I absolutely love, because the work that I do, it's not just the 5 points of helping people understand God exists, the afterlife exists, our soul's immortal living spirit. We can communicate with souls, and that we'll be reunited with our loved ones. What I also try to do is explain that spirit communication is real, the afterlife is real, and so are near-death experiences, and explain that on the basis of quantum physics, science, human physiology, evidence, and to bridge the gap between faith and science. I don't want people thinking that I'm anti-faith or anti-religion. Completely the opposite. What I'm saying is, and pun intended, it's not necessarily the gospel truth. It is interpretations of what people encountered, and they're trying to explain it in the vernacular of the day. And let's face it, the Old Testament was written in the Bronze Age and the New Testament in the Iron Age. And so you have to look at it in the context of the time that it was written.
There's an interesting one like that. We all have heard, the famous quote from the Bible: it's harder for a rich man to get into heaven than for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. Now, that is not referencing a needle like we know it. Back in Jerusalem, there was an entrance to Jerusalem that was called the Needle. And if a camel had too many things on it, it couldn't get through the eye of the needle because it was stacked too high with possessions. And so that's what the literal meaning when it was written was all about. But now we think that it means, oh, well, forget it. If you're rich, you can't get through, this little tiny thing.
And what's interesting, Scott? There's another interpretation in ancient, the ancient term for a needle was also the opening to a cave. and camels are terrified of caves,
Oh.
and they'll start biting. And camels can be nasty. I mean,
Oh,
I've been
yeah.
around them and they're neat, but they'll spit at you, they'll bite you, they'll kick you. And so try getting a camel to go into a cave, okay? And it's gonna, get all upset. And so that's interesting. So just there, using the ancient interpretation for the eye of a needle, you've got one for going to the city of Jerusalem, which applies, and another for trying. It's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Okay, you can lead a camel to an eye of a needle, whether it's a gate in Jerusalem or a cave somewhere in the mountains of Asia Minor, and they're going to give you a hard time. So it's fascinating.
Or even like a little metal thing. You can't.
Well,
shove a
yeah,
camel through-
yeah. Well, all right. Think about this. Okay, so the King James version of the Bible was, oh gosh, this is a whole one. King James was the surviving member of the Tudor dynasty because Queen Elizabeth had her most Catholic cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots, executed, and then Elizabeth dies childless. So her nephew, second cousin, becomes king of England. And what's so funny is I was on a radio station, and this guy called in and he was going on and on about the Bible and mediums are not of God and blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, okay, what version of the Bible do you listen to? And he goes, well, the one true version, the King James version. So now I knew I had him. Okay. So I said, so what does your King James version of the Bible say about homosexuals? He said, well, it's an abomination. He's going on and on and on. I said, well, what do you know about King James? He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, he was an extremely effeminate gay man. He lived openly with another man, and his nickname was the Nancy King. He goes, what? He goes, that's heresy. I go, no, my friend, that's history. And what happened was he was the son of Mary, Queen of Scots. So he was the King of Scotland. And then he became King of England, which was setting the stage for the United Kingdom of England and Scotland. And he inherited a huge political problem because basically the island of Britain had turned Protestant. And his advisor said, we need a copy of the Bible, a version of the Bible in English, the way the Germans under Martin Luther have translated it from Latin to German. Because before Martin Luther and then before James, the Bible, according to the Catholic Church, could only be in Latin and only interpreted by their clerics. So James said, okay, whatever. And so they wrote the Bible in English, ergo the King James version of the Bible. So the Bible that these casting the first stone Christians used to persecute gays was enacted into existence by a gay. But lesbians get a free pass. And here's why. Because nowhere in the Gospels does it say that a woman cannot lie with a woman like she's a man. Check it.
There you have it. There you have it.
So
And
for all of our lesbian listeners, you're going to heaven.
Bisexuals unite. Woo!
well, you have done it again. You're incredible. Question. Oh, okay. Diane does ask a question, which actually I will say a little something about. She asks, do you relate to Nassim Harame's unified view of physics? If you haven't seen The Connected Universe, a feature-length documentary film, yes. So I'll say something about that, and then I want to hear what Mark and Tricia have to say, and then we're going to wrap up. We are living in an amazing time. We are living in a time in which our highest form of science, quantum physics, is actually saying the same thing as what the ancient mystics and philosophers told us. And here's an interesting piece. I don't know if you know about this one, Mark. One of our most ancient spiritual scriptures and texts that has survived are the ancient Vedic scriptures written in Sanskrit about 7,000 years ago. And in the Vedic scriptures, God is called Brahman, and Brahman is given 26 principles. That was written 7,000 years ago. In today's quantum physics, the unified field, which we now scientifically have proven, there's this unified field of ever-changing molecules. And guess what? It has 26 scientific principles And the 26 scientific principles of the unified field perfectly correlate with the 26 principles written about Brahman, God,
Oh, wow.
7,000 years ago.
Wow.
One last little thing that's very cool is, according to Deepak Chopra, who we've had on our show 3 times now, Deepak says that if we live to be about 90 to 100 years old, we will share approximately 10,000 molecules with every other human being that has ever lived. That's how often the molecules are changing. So we've all had molecules from Hitler, molecules from Jesus, molecules from the woman living in the Yangtze River washing her clothes right now. That is how incredibly interconnected we are. So yes, Diane, I do believe in Nassim's unified field, and I'll turn it over to Trish and or Mark.
Oh, I'm all on board with that. And that also, I believe, Nikola Tesla said that he wished he would have read, or he would have been more familiar with Hinduism earlier in his life. And also, a lot of the quantum physicists have said how Hinduism seems to, once you take away, the mythology and all that, and get to the core beliefs, that it seems to be closer to what it is that they're trying to establish. So what you just said, Scott, that's it. And it's funny because in my communication with spirits, Hindus don't believe in the beginning. They believe in a beginning, and that if our universe or our planet, our dimension is destroyed, so what? Another one will reform, and through reincarnation, we will come back, because the soul, the Atman, is never destroyed. It goes on this eternal journey. And I think that that's very, very refreshing.
And God knows how many alternate realities there are, how many alternate Earths there are. I totally believe that there are parallel universes. That's probably another show. Trish, as we wrap up, what are your closing thoughts for the night?
Well, I don't know anything about the unified view of physics, just to be really honest. But since we started this conversation, I've been thinking about the singularity and how there's part of me that wants to just be like, I don't know anything. And I'm just going to continue to spread love and joy and work on my own, in the world. And then there's other part of me that wants to believe in something to purely cure my curiosity or my fear of what is next, right? So in that, as my wrapping up thoughts is the ideas of good and evil, and the ideas of God, even like the idea of good and evil is this like purely a separation experience. I don't actually need to subscribe to that. And the idea of God outside of oneself is so easy to project onto, right? Like, oh, it's God did this for me. No, we all did this. Mark did this, Scott did this, I did this. We're all living in a collective, collaborative reality. And I do believe that there's, something on the other sides of my own, whatever I can't even fathom.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you. Mark, your closing thoughts, and also how people can get more Mark medicine.
Well, Trish, I was doing some research on quantum physics, and I was banging my head against the wall metaphorically, because I just couldn't understand this one concept. And all of a sudden I came across a quote from Werner Heisenberg, one of the founders of quantum physics. And he said, when you think you understand quantum physics, you really don't. And it made me feel so much better, because if Heisenberg was having a hard time with it, and all the quantum mechanics physicists have said that, we really don't understand it. We're just doing our best. So we're all a work in progress. If people want to find out other shows that I'll be on, also my new show, The Psychic and the Doc, that I'm co-hosting with Dr. Pat Basili of the Dr. Pat Show, which is every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. If you want to, please sign up for my newsletter, follow me on social media, and you can book a reading with me. And if you mention Straight Talk and or Scott or Trish, you qualify for a reduced fee reading. And my website is evidenceofeternity.com, which is the same as my book, Evidence of Eternity. And so if you go there, you can sign up for everything. And it's evidenceofeternity.com. And Scott, Trish, thank you so much for having me on. And
Here's the book
the audience.
to put it in everybody's head. Just memorize that as you look at the book, evidenceofeternity.com. And that's pretty cool. A discounted rate for a reading with Mark. Just say Trish, Scott, or Straight Talk. I love it.
Thank you, everybody. God bless. Namaste.
Hey, Mark, thank you. And hey, you know, people don't know, Mark is in Florida, which means that it's now 12:26 a.m. So thank you, brother, for coming on so late and having as much energy as you do and educating us. Thank you.
It's
Thank you.
my pleasure. I look forward to returning, and you guys are great. It's such an honor, and thank you for putting up with my sense of humor.
Absolutely.
I love your sense of humor.
All right. We'll see you all, everybody. And hey, listen, this Saturday night, tomorrow night on Global Peace Tribe, we've got Indigenous Wisdom, some amazing elders that are going to be coming on board and sharing with us. So join us tomorrow night. Take care, everybody. Lots of love.
See you next
See you.
Friday.